I'm now speaking with Rusty York, candidate for 4th District City Council. You know, Mr. York, Rusty York, why did you decide to end a long career with the police department and go to something totally different, such as City Council? Why would you want to do something like that?
That's a good question, Eric. I get asked that a lot. But, you know, in total, I have 37 years of law enforcement experience, both as an officer moving up through the ranks to a captain of detectives. And then I retired in 1997 and went to work with Fort Wayne Community Schools in their transportation division. And came back in 2000 when Graham Richard was elected mayor. I didn't know I could actually even come back after I retired, but I missed the police department, and I'm very grateful that I had that opportunity. And I worked 14 years as chief, and then just in January of 14, Mayor Henry asked me if I would go to the position of public safety director, because at that time we had a very young fire administration that it needed some mentoring, and I told the mayor that probably I wouldn't, if he was elected again, I wouldn't continue on as his chief, and that I think we both agreed that this would be a good time to bring a new police administration in, and I would still be here to help mentor them. And you know, at this point in time, I can say that we have a great fire administration and police administration, and so I've done my job. I've completed my mission, I feel, that the mayor set out for me in mentoring police and fire administrations. And Eric, I just have more to give. Again, most of my adult life has been in public safety as a public servant, but you know, I'm also concerned about some of the things I see, you know, not only in city government, but especially in state government, that really concerns me. And I understand that as a city council person, I won't have control, you know, over state statutes or the state legislature, but I want to be an advocate and a liaison to take the concerns of the city of Fort Wayne to the state level. So I'm excited. I think it would give me the opportunity to still be involved in city government, which I love that involvement. And you know, I guess I would be semi-retired. I'm going to have to do something. I'll be 64 years old in May, and I think at this point in my life and my career that a transition to city council looks very inviting to me.
You know, you mentioned that you've been a public servant for basically all of your working life. Mm-hmm. Why? I mean, where'd that desire come from? I mean, did your parents do that, put that concept in your mind?
I think so, Eric. You know, I come from a blue-collar family. Both my parents grew up in Fort Wayne. I was born here, lived my whole life in Fort Wayne. My father, one of his brothers and a brother-in-law were all Fort Wayne firefighters. And, you know, I guess that started my interest in public service, although not in the fire service. We talked about history a little bit ago, our ancestors. As I said, my father and two of my uncles were firefighters, but a couple of cousins, and now my son's a captain on the Fort Wayne Fire Department, so that tradition continues. But, you know, right out of high school, and this had a big part of me, you know, evolving into law enforcement. The day after I graduated from high school in 1969, I went to work for City Light. I don't know if you remember. Mm-hmm. We had an electric utility then. So I started work there and worked as a groundman, basically, you know, hoisting things up a pole for the linemen working on the lines, evolved into an apprentice, became a journeyman lineman, and worked there for 7.5 years before I went to the police department. But I learned so much about human life, and not only from the crusty old linemen that I worked with, and as you well know, you learn so much from people, not only the right things to do in life, but maybe some things to avoid. So, and also working in the alleys and the streets and seeing people in everyday life, all walks of life throughout the city of Fort Wayne, different conditions people lived in, you know, getting to meet people when I was working, you know, in their house or in their backyard. I think that really rang true to me, how, you know, I wanted to work within the community with people. So I think my family life, my father in public service, and then that exposure to just, you know, that was an education for me. That was a real life education, and it helped me later when I became a police officer, I think, to interact better with people, to get involved in police work for the right reasons.
But that time, your life, the time of your life, from the time you were in high school until the time you graduated, a lot of stuff was going on here in America.
There was.
You know, civil rights movement, riots, big time drugs coming in, and things were just changing all over the place. Did you recognize how history was changing during that time period, or did it take years later for you to look back at that and say, wow, this is what I lived through?
You know, being young, you know, 17, I remember in 1968, we had problems in Fort Wayne. You know, when you're a kid, you kind of take those things in stride, but, you know, looking back, I think it was pretty significant. You know, one thing that I'll never forget was, you know, being a stupid kid, being a friend on spring break. This would have been, let me think, Eric. This would have been of course, you know, the spring of 1969. We decided we were going to go to Florida. We didn't plan. You know, we just got in his parents' car, got a little money, and we took off. And realized very shortly we were going to make it to Florida. But we did end up in Memphis, Tennessee. And by sheer, I realize now, luck, we were out driving in downtown and we saw a group of people and realized we were at the Lorraine Hotel and that this was the 1-year anniversary of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. And, you know, we were there. And maybe I didn't appreciate it at the time, but now I look back. And when my wife and I revisited Memphis just 2 years ago, and we went to the National Civil Rights Museum, what a time look that was, you know, to be able to go back in time and realize I was here, you know, back in 1969. And you know, for your viewers, if you haven't been there, you have to go. What an emotional experience that is. Mm-hmm. But it's you know, I've been blessed throughout my life. My wife and I met in high school. We waited till we were 18 years old before we got married. Right out of high school, and we've been together we celebrated our 45th anniversary. We've been through a lot together. We've seen a lot of things, and but anyway, both of us feel very fortunate to have been able to live in the city of Fort Wayne and give back to a degree. And you know, I'm passionate about being involved in city council because I want to work to keep us on the right track. I think that, you know, I've been able to work and collaborate with successfully people in the city, in the county, elected officials of both parties, and we've been able to get things done as police chief and safety director, and I think I can do that as a city council person.
How have you perfected the ability to be a regular guy, but you were the police chief? I mean, chiefs, you know, they can come in and take out anybody right now. Why have you never worn your "I'm the chief"?
I think that really goes back to my father, who was a very unassuming person. And, you know, again, we came from a blue-collar background. When my dad wasn't working at the firehouse, he was painting houses, and he worked as a custodian at our school. And my mother was worked 2 jobs. She was a seamstress in her home, and she was a cook at our school. And you know, I was taught to say yes sir, no sir, way back. And I guess I've always had that I'm not worthy attitude, you know, that I've had to fight sometimes, that oh, this person's probably, you know, smarter than me, or, you know, lives in a better part of town than me, and I appreciate that we're really all on the same level. And I think being able to, it goes back to the golden rule, you know, that all of us should have been. You know, when you treat people like you would want to be treated, that sounds pretty simplistic. But it's always meant a lot to me, and I think, you know, when I've had interactions with people or groups, Eric, and I've walked into some pretty hostile rooms, and when you can say, you know what, we made a mistake, but we're going to fix it. When you're honest with people and treat people with dignity and respect. I mean, being a cop, things can go downhill. I mean, you got to start off that way, and sometimes, depending on what the person chooses to do or how they react, sometimes it gets more physical or whatever. But I've just always found that you treat people with dignity and respect, and things go much better. I always tell young cops, you know, when you stop somebody out the street, you should treat them just like they were a member of your family, because that's how you would want one of your kids or your relatives to be treated. And, you know, I always think, you know, my talent, Eric, I think is, you know, I'm not a detail person, you know. I can't tell a lot of people how to do their job, but I think my talent is being able to sit down and listen to a group of people. Sometimes they get blinders on, you know, because this is my area of expertise and this is how it should be, and another person. I think I can get to the core of what the issue is and get people to agree, and you just have to say, okay, understand how you feel, but we got to do it this way. So kind of taking a nugget away from a conversation or an argument and convincing people how they should collaborate. And I think that comes from my demeanor. I don't realize it, you know, maybe there's a little bit more turmoil in here than people see, but they always say, well, you're so relaxed, you're so calm all the time. Well, my wife can tell you that's not true, but you know, Eric, it's not something I purposely designed or planned. It's just, it's how I evolved and how I was able to interact with people in a successful manner. You know, when I was a kid, I couldn't imagine getting up in front of a classroom and speaking. That would scare me to death, or an auditorium. But it's just, you know, it's evolved, and I think it goes back to when I was a young cop, a chief of police way back when picked me to be a public information officer and having to deal with the media on camera and, you know, being able to talk about things in front of people, you know, off the top of my head. That's really helped me through the years too.
You know, right now, for the past year, downtown Fort Wayne has been reaching to Iowa and all across the universe, you know, for ideas to bring in Fort Wayne, to make Fort Wayne better, to improve it in some kind of a way. And right now there's an inclusion initiative coming out of downtown Fort Wayne, where we're reaching out and hugging different ethnic groups that are coming to town, gay communities, black people, short people, everyone. And I had the question that if there's going to be an aggressive effort to create an inclusive environment, that must mean that at some point in our history here that there was exclusion going on. So my question was, how do you incorporate, I hate to say the Indians, or our Fort Wayne history, but it seems as though the Indians and the blacks here have been excluded, and the current movements to create inclusion totally ignores the previous here. I mean, it seems like that if you did create a successful movement with the new groups here of today, that by design it has to fail because the foundation is not there.
Well, that's certainly one way to look at it, and I agree with you 100% that certainly exclusion did exist. With our African American community, with the Native American population, with our Hispanic community, Burmese community. It not only existed, but continues to this day. Fortunately to a lesser degree, but it still continues. I guess my view is, you know, it's difficult to go back and fix that, but I think we have to correct that, and we're striving to. And that is something that's a work in progress, but that I worked hard on over 15 years as chief of police and continue to this day to, you know, create a dialogue and maintain a dialogue with communities within our city that have been underserved by the Fort Wayne Police Department for so long. And we do that again by keeping open lines of communication with the community through community leaders, making the Fort Wayne Police Department, and now I'm working on the Fort Wayne Fire Department, to look like our community. But on this journey, you know, right now, it's, when I first got on came in as chief, it was pretty easy in, especially the African American community and to a degree the Hispanic community, to identify leaders, because you just went to the churches. And so many times pastors, you know, are community leaders. That's really doesn't exist to the degree it did once. So we're challenged now with, and that's why we put together the Mayor's Roundtable, to identify leaders throughout our community, to become liaisons, to help us do what we need to do, to create a better environment, a more inclusive environment that serves the whole community better. So I think we have to do better. I think we have to recognize the mistakes we made. I agree with you there. I think it's tough to go back and reconcile those, but we have to recognize. I mean, Eric, I look back when I came on the police department in the mid-'70s, and things happened that were disturbing. You know, I mean, it's so much better now. It's still a journey, but it's so much better now today than it was in the past.
You know, what is your vision for Fort Wayne? I mean, granted that you can't control the whole thing, you just have a piece of it, but what do you see, I mean, in terms of an identity for Fort Wayne? Because when you ask different people, what is the identity of Fort Wayne, you don't really get a clear answer.
You don't. I think, well, I don't think, my vision, what I would like to see is our community being able to create an environment that's attractive to not only people moving here and living here, but also businesses coming here. I want to work hard to create an environment where everybody feels valued, because, you know, right now, Eric, and I know you're very astute about politics, I think there's that spirit in our federal government, to a degree our state government. It's like, you know, give me what I've got coming to me, I don't care about the other person. I'm seeing that well, you know, we've seen that over the last, well, since 2008, since the circuit breakers went in and the property tax caps. You know, the city of Fort Wayne has recognized a loss of revenue from taxes of over $90 million. We expect to lose another $15 million this year over what we've received in the past. You look at the school system, I mean, they were cut $2.5 million. We've been having meetings with the school system figuring out how we're going to get school kids back and forth to school safely. I think we have to change the environment, change the mindset of, I want everything, but I don't want to pay for it. We all have to share in the cost of keeping our city vibrant and making it and keeping it welcoming, again, to businesses, to our residents. I believe that, you know, for younger people, the gentrification of downtown is very important. To bring young people, that's what they want. They want to be close to everything. That's good. And I've heard people say that downtown Fort Wayne's the heart of Fort Wayne. Well, maybe it's a heart, but our communities, our neighborhoods are the backbone, and we can't just focus on downtown. It's important. The rivers are important. The airport's important. But we have to make our neighborhoods, we have to make the people that live in the city of Fort Wayne feel safe and provide the services everybody needs. And that takes, and there's a cost associated with that. And we have to recognize that.
You know, as we wind down here, a couple of things keep popping into mind here. Okay, now you mentioned that you were 64 years old. All right.
Not yet, in May.
Okay. And then you will serve 4 years on council.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll be approaching your 68th birthday.
Mm-hmm.
So logic would conclude that you'll be running for mayor. Do you feel that spirit right now yet?
Not at all, Eric, and I can guarantee you I never will. I don't want to be the mayor of the city of Fort Wayne, I promise. You know, I've been offered the deputy mayor's position by a previous mayor, and you know, like I told Graham Richard then, you know, Graham, I'm a cop. I can run your police department, but you know, when it comes to what you do, you're good at that. And so, but that being said, I do have a passion for the councilmatic side of it, because, you know, the last 15 years, I've been at that table a lot. I've seen, like I mentioned before, I've learned from the good things that council people have done, and I've also learned from the mistakes they've made. And I think I can, you know, we talked about my demeanor. I think that's going to serve council well and the city well, and, you know, just my knowledge of the workings of city and county government and state government. So it'd be a privilege for me, It really would. And I would, you know, you mentioned about what next, and at this point in my life, I couldn't imagine running for a second term if I'm elected for the first term in city council. I think probably 4 years and maybe do something else. But I tell you, I really want the job, but I wish, Eric, that I could interview for it. The campaigning, you know, it's a tough side of it. You know, the fundraising's tough, especially for a cop, to ask people for contributions. It's hard to do, but it's all part of it. And I know that I certainly want to go through this another time in 3 years.
Last question here. What do you want people to know about you that we didn't express here in the interview?
Well, I think I want them to know that Rusty York is a public servant. You know, that's how I recognize myself. That's been my profession. And you know, I think, and you know, I talked about this a little bit. I operate well by listening to people, and I'm going to encourage that. I know some council people now, you try to call them and the mailbox is full or they don't return your call. That's not what people would elect me to do. It would be what I've done for the last 15 years, basically 24/7. I had that phone there in the pager there, and if people needed anything, I answered their call. Be listening to people, and you know, I know I can't make everybody happy, but by listening and again, getting that kernel out of what I'm hearing from many people, and you know, trying to do the best thing. It's hard for me to you know, talk about myself too much, but I'm a very ethical person. If I tell somebody I'm going to do something, I'll do it. And basically, I think over the last 15 years, you know, people have had the opportunity to see me. They know that when I make a mistake, or if the police department makes a mistake, I tell the truth and I tell it fast, and we go from there. And that's how I would continue to serve. Very straightforward.
Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you, Eric. I enjoyed it.
And thank you for watching.